1821, George Frederick Street and George Ludlow Wetmore fought a duel. This evening we find ourselves at the York County Courthouse in Fredericton on February 22nd, 1822, Judge Saunders presiding. The Solicitor General is William Botsford, the prosecuting officer. We will ask Mr. Botsford to enter the court.
Going on.
Mr. William Botsford. We will ask the prisoners, Mr. Street and Mr. Davies, to enter the court. And I will ask Ward Chipman Jr., who is defending the prisoners, to enter the court. I will ask all members of the gallery to rise. His Honorable Judge Saunders presiding.
Please be seated. Thank you. We will now proceed with the court case. Gentlemen of the jury, before you take this case into consideration, I must request you to dismiss prejudice by any attention to stories told out of doors, to which you cannot give any weight, but you will be guided by evidence and carefully weigh that evidence. In the present case, the gentleman at the bar stand indicted for the murder of George Ludlow Wetmore. The event of the party's death is made to appear by the doctors and others on the ground. That being established, it requires attention to see whether the prisoners are the perpetrators of this homicide. The evidence is but presumptive at best, and it should be considered in all such cases with attention and, no doubt, in the present instance particularly. I ask you this: what is murder? Murder is where a person in sound mind and with malice aforethought deliberately kills his victim. The prisoners, Messrs. Street and Davies, are charged with this crime. Malice of two kinds are implied by law: express, where the minds are expressed by outward sense, such as lying in wait, etc. And in this case, murder by dueling, when it can be proved that the parties had gone to revenge themselves. It charges them indeed with express malice, but must be made out expressly. George Frederick Street, how do you plead?
My lords, this is what I have to say. When honor is a support to virtuous principles, which run parallel to the laws of God and of this country, they cannot be too much cherished and encouraged. But when dictates of honor are contrary to religion and ethics, they are the greatest of depravity of human nature, giving wrong, vicious, and false ideas to what is good and laudable, and therefore must be exploded by all countries, and driven out as the bane and plague of human society. I beseech my lordship and the members of this jury to see me as the gentleman that I am.
Thank you, Mr. Street. Mr. Richard Davies, what say you?
This and only this, my lord. I'm a Christian and a God-fearing man, and dueling is in direct contradiction to both the laws of man and God.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. We will now proceed with the hearing. May justice prevail. I ask the jury this: does this malice apply to the prisoners at hand? I call upon Solicitor General William Botsford, prosecuting officer, to call his first witness. Mr. Botsford.
Thank you, my lord. I would call on Mr. Taylor, Esquire, coroner to the county, to stand. Mr. Taylor, what exactly, sir, did you witness on the day of the argument that led to the alleged duel?
On that very afternoon, the deceased, Mr. Wetmore, and Mr. Street were present. I heard a violent altercation between them. I believe it arose about a writ that had no seal on it. I cannot recollect the words that were used, but I did hear the deceased say that Mr. Street had behaved rascally. The violent words were used on both sides.
And when was the next time that you saw the deceased?
I saw the deceased the next day and on Monday. I did not hear anything more of the business until I heard of the duel.
Thank you. Thank you, my lord. I have no further questions for Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, you may sit down. Mr. Chipman, your witness.
I have no questions for Mr. Taylor at this time, my lord.
Do you have another witness you'd like to call?
I would like to call on Sheriff Miller, please. Thank you for taking the stand, Mr. Miller. What exactly did you witness on the day of the argument that led to the alleged duel?
I was present at the time of the altercation, but I do not recollect to attending to the beginning of it. I therefore cannot say what expressions were used on either side. Although I cannot recollect any of the words used, I do know that both parties were violent and appeared very angry. And I do recollect that on the interference of the Attorney General, Thomas Wetmore, father of George Ludlow Wetmore, both parties went on as usual and appeared to bear no malice.
Thank you, Sheriff Miller. Do any members of the jury have any questions you would like to pose? I suggest a question from juryman number 1.
Mr. Miller, when did you last see the deceased?
I saw the deceased on Sunday and on Monday. I saw him on several occasions, in fact, as late as Monday night at 12 o'clock. The deceased was in good spirits. I had no idea that anything more would take place.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Chipman.
Thank you, my lord. Thus it appears, gentlemen of the jury, the parties from this testimony at least, the deceased had submitted to the injunction of his father, the Attorney General, and in his mind had no malice or desire to quarrel. This is all, my lord.
Mr. Botsford, do you have any questions for Mr. Miller?
Not at this time, my lord.
Mr. Miller, you may sit down. I will now call upon Mr. John Seggy. Mr. Seggy, please stand and take the witness stand. Mr. Seggy, what do you have to offer the court?
Well, my lord, I got up at my usual time, and shortly thereafter, I saw 2 horsemen ride by my house, and then they came back. Now, it was pretty thick and hazy, so I'm not sure who they may be. I think one of them may have been the prisoner, Mr. Street. Now, about a half an hour later, I heard 2 shots, and I looked out the house, and I didn't see anybody, so I summoned that it was just people shooting partridge. And about 8 or 10 minutes later, I heard 2 more shots.
May we have a second question from juryman number 2?
Mr. Seggy, were the last 2 shots fired as near together as the first 2?
Yes.
And may we have a third question from the third member of our jury?
Mr. Segay, did it appear to you from the sound to be fired in the same manner?
Yes, and shortly after the last 2 shots, I saw someone coming running towards my house and calling towards me. When he got near me, I saw it was Mr. Winslow. Inquiring of him what had happened, he told me that a gentleman had been shot
in a duel and begged me to immediately go and give assistance. I went and I was directed, but he went the other direction. I found the deceased on the ground. He had wounds in his arm and in his head. He was alive, but he didn't speak and move.
Thank you, Mr. Segui. Mr. Segui, you may be seated. In the transcript before me, it states that you then carried the deceased to the house and laid him on a bed. You then saw two gentlemen ride by very quickly up the road. It states that you think, I repeat, think, that one of the men was Mr. Street. This transcript goes on to say that you think he was dressed in a blue surtout coat, but that you will not positively swear that it was Mr. Street. Gentlemen of the jury, I repeat, will not positively swear that it was Mr. Street.
My lord, might I have the floor?
Not at this time, Botsford.
My lord, may I have the floor?
By all means.
It also states in Mr. Segui's statement that Mr. Winslow shortly came back to the home of Mr. Segui. That Mr. Winslow then took the deceased by the hand, kissed him, and left the house again. Again, my lord, it states that Mr. Segui thinks the gentleman, with the person he took to be Mr. Street, was Mr. Davies. But Mr. Segui refused and continues to refuse to this. It then states that Mr. Segui found two pistols on the ground and saw where two persons had stood. By the marks of their feet, Mr. Segui stated they measured a distance of 9 paces between one spot and the other. Gentlemen of the jury, the gentlemen in question were 20 or 30 rods from Mr. Segui when Mr. Segui saw them pass, and it was thick and hazy.
My lord, might I have the floor?
Not at this time, Mr. Botsford. May we have the fourth question from juryman number 4?
Yes, Mr. Chipman, in the transcript, does it say anything about what the men might have been wearing?
It states that one of the gentlemen whom the son of Mr. Segui took to be Mr. Street had on either a black, blue, or white surtout coat, while Mr. Segui himself claimed he thought the coat to be blue. I thank the honorable member of the jury. I have no further comments at this time.
I call upon our next witness, Dr. William Walford. Dr. Walford, please enter the witness box. What is it that you have to add to these proceedings?
I examined the body of the deceased with Dr. Grant, and it was clear that the deceased was killed by a pistol ball. The ball entered above the wrist, came out below the elbow, and went into the temple. No doubt the extension of the arm gave the direction of the ball to enter the head.
Thank you, Dr. Walford. You may sit down. Gentlemen of the jury, please remember that Mr. Segui, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Miller, and Dr. Walford do have some answers that you must weigh the circumstances. A man is innocent until proven guilty. In my humble opinion, none of these men have offered clear proof that the prisoners are, in fact, guilty. Mr. Segui's testimony will not provide me with enough proof to convict the accused. His testimony will not answer the questions at hand, and he cannot positively identify the prisoners. I reiterate, one must have proof. Mr. Segui was examined before the coroner and then cross-examined. Mr. Segui could not decide on anything, nor would he swear, but only thought so and spoke contradictorily. No attention should be paid to that, and so high a crime as this.
My lord.
Note this time, Mr. Botsford.
My lord, if I may.
Well, Mr. Chipman, the floor is yours.
My lord, gentlemen of the jury, it does not appear by the evidence that there was any such as in contemplated law. The authorities read by the counsel is good law, and you must in all cases have direct evidence of the fact to take a person's life. Gentlemen of the jury, I implore you, you will find all of the evidence to be circumstantial, and that it does not prove them to be the persons committing the crime. If there should be any doubt in cases of this kind, you must acquit the prisoners. Furthermore, one evidence said it was a dark morning, while another evidence mentioning the dressing of Mr. Street said he had on a blue coat, while another called it blue, black, or even white. It is proof by 2 witnesses, brothers to the party, that he never wore a black, blue, or white shirt. There were also several witnesses called as to the character of these gentlemen. And, as we know, character is of great weight in all cases, particularly when there is but presumptive evidence, and it assists you, and there the jury must weigh a case with greater doubt and attention on the part of the crown. Thank you, my lord.
Oh, Mr. Botsford.
Nothing more at this time, my lord.
Gentlemen of the jury, it is my position to introduce all of the evidence at hand. In all cases of circumstantial evidence, there is great room for doubt on the part of the prisoner, and where there is doubt, a jury should always be on the merciful ground and acquit. Everything is liable to doubt in a civil case. Where the story is, however weighed, and the evidence is strong, it is considered proper to strike a balance. This is not the case in a criminal case. There you are not to weigh, the evidence must be positive, and in doubtful cases, you must acquit the prisoner. Therefore, if you have any doubt, acquit the prisoners. Several gentlemen have been called who speak in the most favorable light of the prisoners as gentlemen. And according to the evidence, you were to say guilty or not guilty. I will now ask the gentlemen of the jury to take a brief recess and return a quick verdict. Gentlemen of the jury, have you reached your verdict?
Yes, my lord. The verdict, my lord, is not guilty.
Gentlemen of the jury, thank you. The prisoners stand acquitted. This court stands adjourned. May I remind you of our dinner this evening? We'll be up with local residents, of course. Wow. My staff will be preparing roast lamb, it's their specialty. 7 o'clock sharp.
Thank you, Lord.
The case was dismissed on technicality of coat color. Did you notice that Mr. Freed took off his coat and put it under his chair during the press? That was a little artistic license on my part.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The prisoners were dismissed on technicality of coat color, and that the prisoners had not been proven to have anything to do with the duel. In other words, an affair of honor between gentlemen was exempt from the criminal code. Both gentlemen were acquitted, and George Frederick Street went on to become a Supreme Court judge. On October 18, October 29, 1821, Harriet, Wetmore's wife, had a baby daughter who she named George Ludlow Harriet Wetmore. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank, first of all, the people who helped put this together, the Provincial Archives, for the much-needed research. This project has been going on for a year and a half. Articles by Connie Shanks of the Daily Gleaner, Mary Baxter of the Atlantic Advocate, the Bravest Canadian, L.J.P. Kane, Dictionary of Canada Biography, Lane McIntosh, Legends of New Brunswick, My New Brunswick, and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Dallison. I will now introduce you to the cast. Michelle Dubois.
Because they were elitist.
They were gentlemen. And if you remember, they kept emphasizing the fact they were gentlemen. They were the upper class. And dueling was just one of the things that the upper class did. The rest of it thought it was legal murder. And this trial, the way it ended, public opinion rose so high that never again was there a duel in the province of New Brunswick. This is the last duel fought in New Brunswick. Any questions? What about the duel itself? When the second, Lieutenant Davies said, keep your hand down, raise your arm up, do not aim, do not hesitate. What's with that?
You're supposed to miss.
Pardon?
You're supposed to miss.
You're supposed to miss, yeah. A duel was fought not to kill people, but to get satisfaction. You wanted to get satisfaction from an insult that had occurred to you. So death was not part of it. It might happen, and it did happen.
Dangerous game.
Yeah. But the idea was to get satisfaction and sort out your honor. And throughout the stage, the second, every time, there was a pause. They did their darndest to try to get the two men to agree and stop the duel after the first shot, before they even got to the ground. So the idea was not to kill, but to get satisfaction. So that's why it was very quick firing. And as we heard in this thing, Mr. Sweet fired the first time in the ground. But Mr. Wetmore, his ball went right by his ear. And I think he had second thought. So in the second ball, he said, this guy wants to kill me. So he aimed a little better. Is there any questions?
Why would they switch and this, when they went to do it again, why would they switch?
It was a tradition, but in this particular case, Mr. Sweet had no pistols and had never owned any pistols. So he suggested that Wetmore provide the pistol. And Mr. Wetmore had 2 pistols, but they were not dueling pistols, equal pistols. One of the pistols had, in fact, a problem. And the problem was, it was difficult to cock. So the 2 seconds talked about it and said, cocking the pistols is done by the seconds, it's not done by the way you were firing. It has no effect on the shooting of the pistol, so they agreed to go with it. Wetmore had that pistol first. Pardon me, Wetmore had the best pistol first. In the second round, Sweet had the best pistol. So the idea was just to make sure it's fair. Come on, you gotta give me a skill test.
It seems like hard to believe that this stuff actually happened, you know?
Yeah,
Like children.
quite right. Most people consider it legal murder.
Yeah.
Legal murder for the upper class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There should have had more of them?
Pardon?
There should have been more duels then? Got rid of more of the
There were
upper class?
a number of duels. And it's a good question. But this is the only duel that I know of in the province of New Brunswick that ended in death. There were several duels that ended with wounding. Sweet's father, Samuel Sweet, fought a duel in 1800 with a man by the name of John Bliss. What did they fight over? It had to do with a very famous Nancy Slade trial. And they argued over slavery. Sweet was an abolitionist, Bliss was for slavery. And in that trial, Bliss was wounded. So that's what it's about. My most favorite character is a man by the name of, well, he ended up as General John Coffey. I know that he fought 7 duels.
So how many duels were actually fought?
I can't honestly say that because once again they were secret. Okay, so the 4 men would go out in the field, like this, in this particular case, their wives didn't even know what they were going to fight a duel.
Okay.
They'd go out in the field, and the seconds would talk them into standing down. So and nobody would know that. But I know at least 5 or 6.
What about the widows, Mrs. Wetmore? After we know that she had her baby, but was there any consequences on her? Did she lose any status? Did she be shamed?
Mrs. Wetmore lived to the age of 95, and she was very proud of the fact that she never ever, Mrs. Wetmore lived at 95 and never ever spoke to a Sweet.
Why wasn't there a certain, it could be romantic novel,
In this particular case, they called for a surgeon, and in fact, 2 surgeons, I think one of them appeared as a witness afterwards. When Winslow went back to the Seagee farmhouse and asked Seagee to go help Wetmore, and his son was sent off on a horse to get a doctor. 2 doctors arrived, and if I remember correctly, Wetmore was dead when they both arrived.
You said the earlier jewels were for the guy named Bliss?
Pardon?
You said the earlier jewel was for the guy named Bliss?
Yes?
Is that like Bliss Grammar? The school?
No, oh,
Is the school named after that guy?
I think it might be related. But John Bliss and the Bliss family are still around, in fact, and they were very prominent in the city. So the Bliss family still lives here. Yeah. And he was
So this was last name?
and he was for slavery.
How old were both of the men when the duel was fought?
Pardon?
How old were both of the men when the duel was fought? How old were each of them?
Michelle, I think 34 and 23.
Yeah, they were very young.
They were young men.
And Wetmore, I don't know if you noticed, but the judge is Wetmore. And our defense lawyer is also Winslow.
The intermixing of the Loyalist family is very...
Well, no, the actors played 2 roles. So the person you saw shot was Don, and his second was Winslow. And they switched and put on wigs and became judge and lawyer.
And something happened in the reenactment that you might have not noticed. When Sweet shot Wetmore, he dropped his pistol and ran over cut him and tried to stop the bleeding. His heart wasn't really in this duel at all from the very beginning. But to me, it shows you he had feelings about this thing. Does that help?
Thank you so much. We go way back, King's Landing time. We have to mention that all proceeds to this production went directly to the Queens County Heritage Society. We received sponsorship from the province of New Brunswick through the commemoration grant. We received sponsorship from the Village of New Maryland, the Wetmore Street Pub. Has anybody been there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I have little cards on the table. And
I'll report back in a minute.
oh, yeah. No, maybe. Oh, you should. Oh, you guys. Yeah. Take those.
I just wanted to show it.
Oh, yes. Open Faces. And thanks again for all of our volunteers and our actors.
Well, there's one more thing.
What?
Just the gentleman across from me here.
Yes.
He's also my nephew.
Oh, that's nice.
That's how I went over your good legal counsel and of course the voice of the story.
It's been really interesting.
Before everyone runs off, a big thank you to Michelle and Dawn and Francis and Atlantic for this performance. And I've told this story before, but if you haven't heard it before, this event was actually inspired by Michelle 22 years ago. I got a phone call one morning. She was staying at the Steamer Stop Inn, and the owners called me and said, "They have these people staying here. They have an idea for an event." And they gave me a 30-second rundown for it. And I said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." And from that, our discussion grew into the annual Ghost Walk and Dessert Theater. So I always like to thank Michelle for her inspiration. 23 times that we have done this, we have raised in the vicinity of about $30,000. A big thank you to all of you who have continued to support this event over the years, and even through COVID when we had to be outside, and this is the first time in 3 years we could invite everybody inside to enjoy the desserts under cover and enjoy the performance. Thank you to everyone in Queens County Heritage, Danny, organizing the volunteers, organizing all of the desserts. There's 30 desserts that have to be prepared to feed all of you. So that's a huge amount of work. So thank you, and thank you for the volunteers tonight who get to clean up after you all go. And again, thank you to all of you for the support. You saw our roof going on. We have a roof going on here. There are all kinds of projects that are happening. That's what the money goes towards. So thank you all very much for coming, and we'll see you at Christmas in the Village. Boxes of dessert that are left, so I'm not sure what the plan is for those, Danny. Or people can help themselves, take something on the road with them?
Auction.
Yes.
Oh, actors, yeah, them.
The actors do need something.
Yes.
Let's let the actors come and get theirs, and then whatever is left.
Keep your scripts.